So what I find interesting is that when people have business updates, right? Like a business update meeting, they think they just need to present a lot of facts and that's an update and that's that. I personally think that every story, every presentation is an act of persuasion. My tactic is to, if I get a business brief or a project brief and I go through all of it and I ask the person in front of me that if you could summarize what you want out of this, what's your outcome, and summarize it in one word, in one word, in one word. And once I can latch on to that word, then everything else just kind of follows.
Hi, my name is Jochem van der Veer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called TheyDo, the journey management platform for business decision making. We raised over $50 million and are growing globally. Our enterprise customers include Ford, J&J, the Home Depot, and Pfizer. I mean, wherever you look, understanding customers is key to staying ahead. But in order to do this at scale, aligning so many different teams with the customer journey is incredibly hard, but it is possible. I really wish this podcast existed before we started our company because so many companies are organizing around journeys and there's so much to learn. So in order to share what I'm learning, what I'm hearing with our community, I meet with industry experts. And in my video podcast, I'm here to explore the world of business strategy, design, and journeys, customer journeys, to really get an understanding of how leaders are changing their way in their business. So let's dive into the show. So my guest today is Suchi, and she's a creative director with over a decade of experience across Silicon Valley and Hollywood, specializing in transforming complex technical business ideas into compelling visual and spoken written stories that drive actual results. And this is fascinating to me because she spent 10 years at Apple as a group creative director, leading global sales content. And she's now serving as the director of storytelling, which is a novel role at PayPal, bringing product innovation to life across agentic commerce, Venmo, and global payments. When we were rehearsing her last name, I mean, it's not often that I hear that. She said, like, don't bother. Everyone calls me Suchi. So Suchi, welcome.
Thank you, Jochem. I'm so happy to be here and thanks for having me.
Yes, my pleasure. I mean, it's not always that I get a designer on the show, even though it's the experience edge. And when we were talking to get started, you said something interesting that obviously you have a design background, but you came to really appreciate the business. And maybe that's a good way to get a little bit of feel for who you are before you go into storytelling and how that actually works and examples and the things that you've been able to do over the last few years. But if you have a design background, right, empathy comes naturally and not necessarily business comes naturally. But you say you like business, right? Designers go, what's there to like about business? I care about my customer. They don't care about my processes. But you have a different opinion. So what is that about? Like, what does that for you?
Yeah, I would say that I come from a business family. So there's part of it that's been kind of like just part of my childhood, kind of growing up. And but I was never interested in it growing up, and I was always a creative at heart. But I would say that my background was in animation and storytelling, and that was something that was like a huge part of me. When I came to Apple, one of the senior directors actually called me in to kind of help them do presentations. And it was the first time I was exposed to things that were under the hood when it came to business. And he felt like there was a natural kind of culmination of storytelling with what they wanted to communicate. And I think that I give kudos to him for kind of bringing me in and really sparking that inspiration in me. Is like, wow, I had no idea that this is how, business stories are told and this is how things have to be pitched. And my role during that was to kind of come up with like a fluid kind of story to tell in a compelling way. And so that kind of sparked that um, inspiration and kind of like my love for business, because I was like, wow, this is fascinating how business problems are solved, how vision is communicated, how you need clarity in what you're kind of thinking as a vision for what you're trying to say and bring that into the work. And so that kind of triggered a fascination for it. And then I actually went to Stanford and did a business course. And that really helped kind of connect the dots for me across design and business and kind of really hone that skill and bring that to my work on a day to day basis.
What's fascinating about this is that you would think like, okay, Apple, they're known for their presentations, right? It's all about design. But what you're saying, actually, like, no, the presentations are all about the business. What is the what was the biggest disconnect, or like the thing that intrigued you the most when you realized that? Like, before, you probably had a preconceived notion of what a presentation would be, what a story in that presentation would be, but then understanding the nooks and crannies of how the business is translated into that. Like, what is some of the bigger revelations that you had? Like, if you can give an example of what that was like back in the days.
When it comes to business storytelling, and especially for business leaders, they get very entangled into the details of what they're trying to communicate. And when you are in the boardroom and you're trying to communicate an idea, you got to start with what is the North Star? What's the vision for where you're trying to go? And everything else kind of comes out of that particular North Star or the vision. And you have to kind of sequence the information in a logical way that kind of gets the person and across the desk from you to say yes, 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 yes. And so to get them to a yes when you're trying to pitch an idea, you have to kind of again logically sequence your ideas in a certain way. And I think that that's something that I really got to hone in my previous job and um, bring that together in other ways, in other formats.
Why do you think it's so hard for people to actually put this in practice? Because I'm sure people listening to this go, yes, that makes sense. Obviously, we need to start with the end and then work back and then actually like have a story to build that up. But when you think about in reality, oh, I have to do the monthly report to my stakeholders and I'm tying together all the customer insights. Oh, this needs to be in there. Yes, that needs to be in there. Oh, I need to have a slide on. And before you know it, you have 40 slides with all the bullet points, with all the details.
Yeah.
Everything is correct, but you're not getting your message across. And at the end of it, people not thank you for the meeting, and basically you
Hmm.
wasted a lot of people's time, and nothing happens. And certainly nothing
Yeah.
happens that you hoped that had happened. So where does that like disconnect come from? Like, what are you seeing people do over and over again the wrong
So
way?
what I find in yeah, I what I find interesting is that when people have business updates, right? Like a business update meeting, they think they just need to present a lot of facts and that's an update and that's that. I personally think that every story, every presentation is an act of persuasion. You are over there to persuade the person to think differently about something. Either you're persuading them to say a yes to your idea, you're trying to communicate an idea through the data that you're presenting, or you're trying to, in some way, change the perspective of the person in front of you. And I think that people miss that part and they just think that they need to present everything. And I think that once you're clear on, like, where do I need the person across from me? Where do I need to lead them to? Where do I need them to go? Then you become very clear of your intention. And then you automatically remove anything that doesn't serve that purpose or that intention. So you clear out the noise and you're very clear on, like, I want to give this business update so that I can what? You know? So that's where I think people kind of forget
Yeah,
and put in everything.
I think if you ask people listening, think about the last 5 presentations you gave. Like, let's be honest with ourselves. Like, how many of those did we actually answer this question? I'm going to share this with this person, with this group, so that I can. Like
That's right.
if you score 1 out of 5, I think you're doing great. But typically, like if you have 0 out of 5, I don't think you're
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah. And I think that there's also, it can get muddied when you have two or three different intentions. Usually it's just one goal. And you
Mm.
have to be very clear on that one goal, what it is. And then everything that you put in your presentation, in your talk track, in your slides has to be in the service of that one goal.
Well, what
So,
are ways
yeah.
to get better at this? What are you suggesting for people how to start with this? Because it's one thing to even understand what your goal is for yourself, but then the pitfall might be like, I'm going to put it on slide 1. My goal is X, and then the persuasion not really happens because you're too clear on
Hmm.
your goal. We go like yes or
Yeah.
no, and if it's a no,
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to overcome that. So, how do you help teams overcome this step by step?
If I have to, I think that any great storytelling requires a good structure. And for a good structure, I think that you want to kind of start off with the purpose you are there. What is the purpose? And it can be something broad as like, what is the purpose of your team or your work, or how does what you do connect with the end customer? You have to start with the big picture. Once you kind of set that up, and it is kind of like the big vision that you have, or the ideal world or ideal case scenario, you then go into what are the barriers to it? What is the problem that's there that cannot help us achieve the big vision that we have? And then what is my solution to it? So just all of that kind of brings together this structure where you are setting up your vision, you're framing your problem, and then you're going in with your solution, and then you are kind of going into why your solution is the best solution. You could come up with like 10 different solutions, but this is the reason why we are going in this particular direction to solve this particular problem. And once you kind of communicate that structure, people very easily kind of buy into it because it's a logical way of telling your story. And this is mainly in the business context for business presentations.
Yes, and there's business presentation like, okay, I have a new idea, I have a new concept, or based on this insight, I want to actually move the needle by doing this or make this investment. It's the bigger ones. What about the more recurring meetings? Because the reporting, the monthly review, like the quarterly business review, like QBRs, EBRs, however you call
Yes.
them, should we think about them the same way?
Absolutely. I think that when you are going into a quarterly business review, you have to ask yourself, what are my blockers? What are the things that are not helping me move fast enough? And how do I communicate that in the quarterly business update so that those blockers are removed and I can move faster in what I need to do?
Yeah.
So I think that even for business updates, that could be just the run of the mill day to day or business as usual. You can always improve something. You can always do something better. What are those things? And then kind of framing your story around that, because at the end of the day, then you want those blockers removed and for you to accelerate whatever you're working on.
You said that the hardest part is not dumping your complexity on the customer. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here from my research that I've done. Um, so that's on the customer side. This is more like on the internal side. But let's take customer, quote unquote, with the end user of your
Mm-hmm.
story, the one to be persuaded, the one to take action that is aligned with your intention. So maybe walk me through your own process. Like, how do you personally like clean up a messy idea and
Mm-hmm.
decide on what not to say? Because like, if you have the goal, if you know the problems, the barriers, you have a solution that you want to bring to life and you want to lead the witness, so to say, that's all great. But it's also like cutting 20 other things that you are not going to say. So how do you do that? Like, what have you crafted? Like, if you go and make a story today, like, how do you omit things? How do you get rid of that? Like, what's your process?
So, first of all, a lot of people are not self aware enough to know that they are dumping their complexity onto the end user.
Hmm.
And they I think that first of all there needs to be a little bit of self-awareness that I need to do my hard part in taking away the complexity to make it simple for the end user or the audience to kind of know what I'm trying to communicate. So I personally think that life is hard enough. You're consuming so much data on a day-to-day basis that every person's job who's trying to communicate an idea is to first of all take away any kind of cognitive load that they're adding on the person who's in front of them. So that's the first part, is you got to be self-aware to know that you want to take the cognitive load off. Once you've decided that you want to take the cognitive load off and you want to simplify something, my tactic is to, if I get a business brief or a project brief and I go through all of it and I ask the person in front of me that if you could summarize what you want out of this, what's your outcome, and summarize it in one word. In one
One
word.
word.
In one word.
Don't your business stakeholders go crazy? Like, oh, Suchi,
They
please.
don't go, yes, absolutely. It's the hardest thing to do. It is the hardest thing to do because, if you want to ask someone what they want to communicate, they will ramble on for an hour. But if you ask them to summarize it in one word, they have to clean up their thinking so much to narrow it to that one exact word they're going for. It could be a feeling or an emotion that they want the audience or the end user to walk away with, or it could be an outcome, it could be a behavior, it could be something, one word that they need as an outcome. And once I can latch on to that word, then everything else just kind of follows, because then you know that that is your anchor word, and then you're just going to make again everything in service of that particular idea. Sometimes I give people leverage to use three words instead of one word, but it still needs to be one single core idea, and that takes a lot of effort on the person's part to clean up their thinking to land there.
Do you give it back to them as an assignment? Because I can imagine if you're serving an in-store team, like buy or sell are the things they ultimately want to get across, which is obvious. But it sounds like that's not necessarily the word that you're looking for in that.
No.
So how much time do you give them? Or like, do you help them? Or is this a known practice? Like, and what are some of the words that you can actually work with? Like, if you're willing to share some examples.
Yeah, so you gave the example of an in-store team and I think that buying or selling is simplifying this. Anyone can buy and sell. What are you uniquely trying to do, right? And it could be, I want my customer to be delighted. It's delight. And then when you come up with a word like delight, and that means that there's a certain emotion you're trying to extract out of what you're trying to present. And then that's what you kind of anchor the tone of whatever you're communicating into that. Sometimes it could be that, oh, I want to reach or scale so many customers. All right. Is scale the only thing? What do you want them to do with your brand or your product? And it could be something as simple as engagement. I want them to be engaged enough to really feel like part of my brand. And then everything kind of anchors around that. So again, it's not landing on something that's very superficial. It's actually going a little bit deeper and really extracting the emotion or the behavior you want the end user or the customer to anchor on.
I can also imagine that once that's clear for them, for the person that gave you the brief in the first place, that it helps them as well to be like super clear on like, oh, hang on a minute, I gave you like this 2-pager or maybe like this whole deck of data and information, and I want you to tell this story. That all of a sudden they are able to also cut and remove. Is that fair assessment, or is that still the work of the
Absolutely.
storyteller?
No. I think that again, I personally think a lot of people dump their complexity on me as a storyteller. And this is my way of like getting them to clean up their thinking before we can start collaborating on a project together.
Right. So don't dump your complexity on the customer, just dump it on Suchi. Where should we put your email? Like maybe there's a good place to plug your email.
My job is to help you take away the complexity in your own head so that we can kind of work together on making the best business story or the story
Um,
you want to say.
so without a Suchi in your company, like teams who, I mean, it's an obvious thing to be more simple, to be more clear, to be more intentional. So what are some smaller things that teams can actually do to have an impact on how they work today, how they operate today, how they simplify things today, how they bring that like unique anchoring word, phrase, or emotion into to the mix? Like, what will be some things that my listeners, our listeners today, can actually start doing that is not that much of effort, but makes it really impactful in how they are approaching the stories they want to share?
I think one of the simpler things that I have come to realize recently through my experiences is that when people present their stories or presentations, they don't come in with a point of view. And they come in with a lot of options. And yes, you are presenting to your boss and you're trying to get a decision out of them. But even if you're presenting two or three options, come with a perspective and a point of view and why. And that's why you are here. You are here because of your expertise. And I think that you should kind of use your expertise in coming up with a point of view and then leading the person there. I think that when the hardest part of selling any idea is keeping all the options open and telling that person to choose. And then you have completely lost control. And I think that as a person who's trying to get someone to buy into your idea, you have to have a point of view and a perspective and anchor that in logic to get that person to buy into a particular idea and lead them down a certain road. Again, it's about intentionality. You want to lead someone into a conversation or a story, even if you're giving them options or making it seem like you're giving them options. So give people options, but have a point of view in how you want to, where you want to lead them.
Okay, so it's almost like the intention should be constant, but the story must adapt to the person that you're gonna speak to.
Yeah, the intention is always an act of persuasion. It is always an act of persuasion, whether you're trying to persuade someone through inspiring them, through informing them, through however you're trying to do. At the end of the day, you're trying to get them to do something or think something about something differently.
Is persuasion, is that a concept that you find important for people to take away? I mean, no one likes to be sold, right? No one likes to be
Yes.
persuaded. We don't like to feel like we're nudged into a direction that we don't want to go into. So to me, I don't know, I'm not a native speaker, right? I'm from the
Yeah.
Netherlands, but persuasion sounds a little bit fishy to me. Is that something that you think is important to actually like bring into a business with intention?
Yeah, maybe your interpretation of persuasion is a very strong interpretation. Persuasion can also be through inspiration. You inspire someone through how well your product works or how beautifully you've designed a particular product. And by inspiring them, you've kind of at least helped them consider your product. And you may not be kind of overly selling it, and that's fine. I think that persuasion is just being able to communicate an idea for someone to buy into your idea. And it doesn't necessarily have to be as strong as like you're overselling them into it. You can inspire them. You can make them see something differently so that they're like, aha, that's cool. I wanna be part of that.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. Do you want more exclusive content and behind the scenes access? Check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation. Right. So it's a natural change versus like forced change.
Absolutely.
And it sounds also
Yeah.
more authentic, right? When like maybe we should come to the point of view again is that when you're not actively selling, like I can tell you, like I love this product, which I don't, and you'll feel it. But if I'm honestly believing that this is the best thing, or it's crafted so well, or it does this thing that you might be interested in so nicely, then it becomes
Yeah.
easy and then it's believable, right? So there's like this authenticity piece that's part of that.
Yes. I think that it is part of also trust building, right? Storytelling is a great mechanism for trust building. And one, you kind of like start with, hey, you start with empathy. Hey, I know where you're at, what problems you have. Here's my product or service that's going to like make your life a lot easier and hopefully solve your problem. And so when you're trying to again use storytelling, you start with empathy, but it's again about a lot of trust building and making the other person feel like they trust you, you seem authentic, they believe in the solution you're trying to like sell to them, and that they would actually consider it or feel like, oh, actually it would be good if I had that.
Right. Which is like customer experience 101, right? We have like the
Yeah.
awareness stage, the consideration stage, and then there's
Right.
conversion, right? You're buying, or at least
Yes.
you're trying. So it all is
Yes.
like back to simplicity. But I think you have a better framework for that when we think about telling the stories, right? You have framework around audience context transformation, you call ACT,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is almost like what we're talking about, right? It's from awareness to consideration to
Yes.
conversion, right? You're transforming. You thought A and now you think B, and you're ready to buy something. So,
Yes.
can you unpack like your audience context transformation framework, how that works, and how you've developed that?
Absolutely. So, I mean, with before you start with anything, you have to know whom you're talking to, right? Your audience. And it's not necessarily going so much into a demographic of a particular type of person, but it's more of like understanding what is the problem that you're solving for? What's that group of people that you're solving this problem for? So, who's your audience? Where are they? The context can be where are they in a multiple different ways? Where are they physically? Where are they mentally? Where are they in their customer journey? Right. And so it could be like, again, from what you said, like, are they in their awareness part? Are they in the consideration part? Have they already kind of decided they're going to buy this product, but now you just want to kind of do that one last bit where this is how you actually use our product and it's very easy, and then you've converted them, right? So where are they in that context, and how you're going to transform them from one state to another? So it could be, how am I transforming their journey from like, how am I going taking them from awareness to the consideration stage, or consideration to the conversion stage, and what kind of stories do I tell to move that needle? And part of it um, is, you always have to kind of think of that one thing about your story or your product that's going to create like a wow moment, a moment where they will feel like, oh, like at Stanford, they call it like the eyebrow raise. Like it just kind of like changed something in them to like
Mm.
consider you in some way. And so, what is that particular thing that would make someone raise their eyebrow or go, wow, or like, wow, that's cool. I want to be part of that. And I think that a lot of people miss that when they're trying to tell a story.
Let me unpack that a little bit with you. So it's very clear if you have big keynote presentation, a room full of people that are ready to hear that the latest newest product might come out or might not come out. So it's filled with anticipation. They are ready to hear what you have to say. Like, and then you come in with a beautiful story that moves the needle, and there's like not just an eyebrow raise, but it's like, wow, right? And there's loud
Mhm.
applause and everyone is cheering. Now, when you're thinking about simple customer journey, when people are buying insurance and want to add their child to the insurance plan, that's not
Mm-hmm.
the moment where you have a beautiful keynote, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how do people think about this? So the context is this. Thinking about adding my child to insurance. Maybe I should open a new policy, go with my current insurer. Like, I don't know. I'm considering all these things. Like, help me understand, like, how the ACT framework actually helps
Mm-hmm.
me to help this team. And it could be like the customer experience team or the marketing team, but like trying to get a
Yeah.
mundane scenario, right? Where there's not like
Right.
Steve Jobs running on stage, everyone is
Yeah.
anticipating. No, it's like,
Yeah.
let's do something boring. So how does this
Yeah.
help that team?
So I think that first again, you kind of start with the audience and what mind frame people are in, and the context, right? So again, what kind of context are you in, or an emotional state are you in when you're trying to add someone to your insurance? For me, I just want to get it over with. It's not something that I want to like spend too much time on. I just want it to be done, and I want to make sure that my child or whomever I'm adding is like insured with all the things that I need to kind of say. So it could be something as simple as, how can I make this so simple for you that I'm taking away any kind of complexity you might have, or like boredom, or like trying to kind of bore you with like a million details, to just give you the key details that you need to know to feel safe and assured that whomever you're going to add is going to like, be insured the way you want them to be. And so partly it is kind of like, who's your audience? What state are they in? Usually, a mental state of someone buying something like that is want to take away as much cognitive load, make it super easy, and then just go straight into conversion. In that sense, I think that in that simplicity is the conversion mechanism for even as something as simple as that.
Right. And then conversion would be the transformation, right? I go from like, should
Yes.
I do it, to I'm doing it. Like that's the
Yeah.
transformation. What is interesting is that you do it pretty quickly, and I think it comes natural to you. But you unpack the emotional state, right? At first, it's like, okay, I need something functional. So you
Mm-hmm.
easily translate it as, okay, it has to be simple, it has to be straightforward, remove the complexity. You're in the like, I need to do this, very practical and functionally oriented. So make it easy for me. But
Mm-hmm.
then you suddenly shifted to saying like, so that I can feel safe and secure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a big leap. I mean, in your mind, it probably goes fast because you've done this a lot of times. But that is a
Mm-hmm.
big leap, because what you would typically see many insurance sites is like, then you get the big disclaimer, and then you get the paperwork and the not so fine print and all of the things to consider. So that's actually scaring you away. It's not simple, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also giving you more reasons to doubt and just let me mull it
Right.
over again. I'll come back to it tomorrow, and then life happens and you don't, right? So how did you make that leap? Like, what happens in your mind to go from functional to like, oh no, safe and secure is actually where I need to be?
I think that people overdo on the disclaimers and fine print. I think that if you can actually make the fine print a lot more simpler and more pertinent to the person who's signing up for it. Where if the fine print is as simple as two or three sentences, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I got it, then you're doing your job and you're building trust with it. I think that the more over explaining you do and put everything in there, the more you're scaring away the person trying to sign up for your product. And so, again, as you mentioned, like partly it is like, what is the right level of detail you want to communicate in a particular juncture so that it takes that person from one state to the next, and you don't have to dump all of the details up front, and you can actually sequence the detail in a way where it is chunked, it is cognitively easily digestible, and then it
Hmm.
moves that person from one state to another.
So it's actually the transformation between the state of mind, the emotional state I'm going through, like
Hmm.
functional, let's get it done, to being transformed into, I got it done and now I feel safe and secure.
Yeah, as you're kind of going through that process too, like you're
Yeah.
making it simple enough where they're like, oh, I trust this. Okay, I have like the right information. I can get to my decision faster.
I wish more people were more intentional about like their journey design, right? When you think about literally about the customer journey, like when we think about pain points, it's often like where is the frustration, where it's coming from, like what's happening in this particular step or phase. But we should also be intentional about, okay, so maybe the frustration comes from a lack of clarity, but in the next step, in the next part of this experience, we want people to be feeling safe and secure. So how do we
Mm-hmm.
design that? And
Mm-hmm.
what people often do is, oh, we need a peak end experience in our journey, or we need to, you know, have like super speedy processing to remove any friction possible because it's just annoying and we have to get it done. But there's much more to this. Are there any other like from to emotional shifts that are common that you're seeing or that you're consistently seeing in different parts of your work?
I think that again, I see the same mistakes happen over and over again, where this emotional connection that you want out of your end user is an afterthought.
Mm.
And it's a legal print, and you're just putting everything out there to cover your bases, not considering how it is for the other person to actually experience that product in that particular stage. And so again, I feel like, what is the level of information that this person needs at this time? Can I take some other information and put it somewhere else and kind of phase it, and really caring about, again, how much cognitive load are you adding in a particular step to a person? So again, I feel like it's hard work. It's hard work to simplify and to care enough to know what kind of details you want to put at every stage. But you, if you do the hard work, people trust you more with it,
Mm.
with your product.
How do you operationalize this? Because if you get a briefing, there's clearly a need for improved storytelling. But if we look at an enterprise organization, I'm sure like if you go go in and say free reign, just have a look, you'll probably find 500 points where you could bring this in
Yeah.
on day one. So how do you
Hmm.
operationalize this? How do you make sure that this is not just a storytelling capability that we have for the high end things, but we actually bring down into the company, into the way we operate?
I start with prioritizing high impact areas. And high impact areas can be where is like the biggest reach of the customer? Where will this actually impact the most? Just in terms of sheer numbers. So maybe scale is like a priority. Maybe a strategic area of a certain way that you're trying to tell a story in a certain place is an important area. So it comes down to prioritization of like how many people are impacted by this one particular thing, and how important is it on the business side for us to
Mm.
get this one particular piece right. And it starts from there, in terms of, because there are, again, as you said, when I walk into a certain situation, there could be a million things that could be fixed, but I start with making sure that where the impact is the most and kind of start from there.
Okay. So that's on the big side. And then the intention that teams can have on the day to day shows up more
Hmm.
on the transformation between steps in their funnel, their journey,
Yeah.
in the people that go through, as long as they're intentional about their audience, not necessarily say everyone is our audience, but who actually is it that we're seeking to serve here? And we need to help
Yes.
transform from one state to the other.
I think people, for most part, know that, like they understand that. I think when they get like very bogged down in their day-to-day work, they forget. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it's just about reminding teams or people that this particular thing is in service of what? Of this particular customer, to solve this particular problem in this particular context. And once you kind of anchor people back into that, the storytelling becomes a lot easier. I think that people just forget as they kind of get into the weeds.
Right. So when we're in the weeds of it, right, we're like stuck in our product logic, stuck in our marketing lingo, or just like get that conversion done. Um, what are some concrete checks that teams can actually run into their deck, their campaign, their feature launch to force a shift into like story logic, if I can call it that way, instead?
Mhm.
Like, how would you think about like building some of the checks in? Like, what should they be asking themselves? Like, what should they be checking off if they did or didn't?
Yeah. I think that, say, for instance, teams that have worked a long time on a particular solution and they're going back to present that particular solution. It's very important that and the person whom you are presenting to may have forgotten how you even started this problem, because there's so
Mm.
many things coming at us on a day-to-day basis. It's important to anchor your listener to where you started, and it could be first 2 or 3 minutes just to anchor them, and that's fine. I think that just by anchoring, making sure that the listener is anchored on the problem you're trying to solve, you become anchored in the problem that you're trying to solve and are much more clear in the story that you're trying to tell. So, always making sure that, again, there are people who have a lot of information coming. They could have forgotten what you presented to them last time. You're just going to anchor them back into why you are solving this problem and then kind of telling your story. And then that again helps you kind of anchor your story. So just a small shift like that. And again, always being empathetic to the person in front of you and not necessarily assuming that they know everything, and giving the right level of detail that you need to give them at that particular stage.
What are some of the tells that um, a story is actually derailing? Is there ways that you could do that? Even though people are like, okay, let's anchor on the problem, but then you see them derail during their presentation or during like the development of content around this. Like, what would be some of the tells that people can watch out for to see that they're actually not derailing?
Sometimes you can get derailed for, it can not be like your fault. You could have done everything right, and the
Hmm.
story still could get derailed based on the context or the state your listener is in. It
Yeah.
could be that the person came from a very difficult meeting, previous meeting, and now they are in this meeting with you and their mind is somewhere else. So, first of all, I would say give a little bit of empathy and grace and space to your own self if something doesn't go well, and even how much ever well you may have prepared yourself. So that's just like something out of your control. For things that are in your control, I would say if you stick to your storyline, really rehearse your presentations or your stories before you go into a boardroom or any kind of presentation. I think people can easily tell when you go into a meeting and you're rambling and you're not very clear on your own story, and then they start asking you a lot of questions, and then you're caught on your back foot defending yourself. That it's very important that you know the story you're telling, you rehearse it before you go into a presentation. It's very small things like that. And if you cannot talk through your story with conviction, then that energy can also be felt. At the end of the day, any kind of storytelling is an exchange of energy, and people can pick up on energy faster than logic. And so I think that preparing yourself well, telling your story with conviction, making sure you're staying true to what you're trying to communicate, and yet being open to feedback and taking in the information that the other person is conveying are important things.
Oh, that's so nice. People are actually like more prone to the energy picking up than the logic. That's
Yes.
what they're saying, right? Yeah. And now
Yes.
that you put it that way, like I've been on the receiving end of so many presentations where like you're just reading your bullets from the screen. You don't even know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
And it's just a laundry list of things, which all make sense, but you don't have me. Whereas been also on the receiving end of simple presentations, or hey, can I have a 15-minute check-in because I want to share something? Whereas like very intentional energy on something very specific, and then there's like maybe some backing with data or backing with like facts or whatever it is. You're engaged, you're listening, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's a good point, actually. But the problem is, it's really hard for people to catch themselves when doing that. And it's very awkward for people in the room to call it out. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
I have a direct report who's doing that, I don't want to have them feel ashamed or feel like they've done something wrong in front of the rest of the group, right? So
Yeah.
you let it go on a bit while you go internally, like, should I do something about this? Um,
Yeah, I actually, because of that particular thing, and specifically because I run a creative team and we do a lot of idea pitching, is that I make a lot of space for my teams to present within our team itself and get the practice with presenting internally. It's a lot more forgiving space when you're practicing within your own teams storytelling. And once you've practiced that enough and you've gotten the feedback on how to hone your storytelling within your team, then you're much more confident in being able to present to external. So I would highly encourage people to present your storytelling and your presentations to a friend, to a peer, to a colleague within a small kind of safe space, and do that before they go into a big presentation so that they are much more well prepared with the questions they might get or where the other person is fumbling to follow their story along.
how do you spend your days as a director of storytelling? Because now you tell me this, I'm imagining like you're standing like literally in like a mini theater where people go and okay, it's presentation time and we rehearse a couple and here's like person A, B, and C doing it and we're all there. But how does a typical week look like? You get these briefs, you work through them, and that's the work you do? Like, what does a director of storytelling do at PayPal?
Um, my day-to-day work right now has been more around observing, um, figuring out where the storytelling could be better or smoother or where things didn't go well. So a big part of my role right now is kind of like observing things. And once I've kind of observed, then I kind of like take notes and like see where things can be improved. I can see gaps of like where people could actually become better at their storytelling. When it comes to product innovation stories, it's very important to kind of frame certain innovations in a way that kind of really blows people's minds and like, wow, that's a new way of doing this, or that's kind of cool, or wow, this is going to change everything in like the payment space or like the agentic commerce space. And so kind of looking at those kind of things and kind of figuring out how we're going to tell those product innovation stories in a way that someone would find that's cool. I can see that completely changing the e-commerce space, or I would use that if I had that, so finding those opportunities.
As a director of storytelling,
Hmm.
you're in a fantastic position to think with your company about the future. For people listening who don't necessarily have this capability in house, where does storytelling sit? Where should it sit? I mean, everyone can do a little bit better, obviously. Everyone wants to do
Hmm.
better, but who is naturally prone to take the responsibility of being like the chief creative storyteller? Like who can be that in the company, and what should this person do?
I think every person needs to become a chief creative storyteller of their own ideas. And I think everyone has the capacity to tell a great story. We are all human beings. We are all wired for stories since like prehistoric times. And so I think that storytelling actually comes very naturally to all of us. Think of like when you're telling a story to a family member, or you're telling a story of like something that happened to you. Bring that kind of sensibility and structure and emotion into your idea pitching. And I think that if you have conviction in your ideas, the storytelling comes very easily. So I think anyone, I think it's anyone and everyone's job to be a good storyteller in work or business or life.
Yeah, what is interesting about the way we've had this conversation, it strikes me that there's this logic to how you bring a story in business to life, right? And in your case, it's like audience context transformation, like repeat, repeat, repeat. Um, but what I'm also hearing is that you're not very specific on the quality of the story itself. Like, how do you frame a beginning? How is the narration going? Like, it sounds almost like you're saying just take the natural way that you're telling a story, but then rooted in the business context, like rooted in these
Mhm.
principles. That's more useful than actually like get like a templated approach on like here's how to craft the perfect story and then rehearse, rehearse, rehearse.
Yeah, I think that rules and frameworks help, but sometimes it actually helps to break the rules and tell your story a bit differently too. And I think that when you use the same structure over and over again, it gets very repetitive and people just expect it. And
Mm.
sometimes it's good because it again takes some of the cognitive load off and the other person can absorb your ideas better. But sometimes it actually helps to throw a wrench and break the rule a little bit and break the fourth wall, as they do in movies and television, and kind of talk directly to your audience in a different way. So I think that rules and structures are great. It's also good to break them once in a while.
Who do you think is a great storyteller that is not necessarily known for it? Like obviously here at Apple, Steve Jobs is the king of the storytelling in business. But who would you say
Mhm.
today you admire for great storytelling that might not be obvious for people to say, oh, he or she is a great storyteller?
I think most people that I actually follow are just naturally great storytellers. The one name that's coming to my mind is Malcolm Gladwell. He's just a fantastic storyteller, and he just I saw one of his masterclass, and he gamifies his storytelling, which is very
Mm.
interesting to me. He engages the audience in the thought process of whatever he's talking. So I do think that great storytellers have this two-way street with their listener, where they kind of help the listener think about something differently as they're kind of narrating the story. And so I think that his his aspect of like gamification in the storytelling is pretty awesome.
Is that something that only he can do? Is that something that comes natural to him? Or are there things about gamifying it that you think there's merit for other people to learn from?
You know, I didn't even know he did that till he actually articulated that in that masterclass. So for me, I was like, oh, I didn't realize he was actually doing that to me. And that's
Mm.
how his craft is so strong at that he doesn't even, you're intrigued, but you just don't know why you got intrigued with that hook. And he's just so good at it. So
Right.
going back to how you mentioned, like, storytelling being an act of persuasion where you kind of almost feel dirty that you're being oversold with things. You want to be able to sell your idea in a way that the person doesn't even realize you're selling your idea. You just made them think differently or shift their position in a very unique way that they themselves bought into it. So I think that at the end of the day, that's kind of the cool part about storytelling.
I love that. Suchi, thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom with us today. If people want to reach out, where is the best place they can find you and ask you about storytelling?
Absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, and I also have my own website, suchi.net. So you can get in touch with me either way.
We'll put a link in the show notes. It was fantastic to have you here, and I can't wait to start to practice some of the things I've learned in my own company.
Thank you so much, Yokum. I love talking with you about this. Thank you.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found it valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by TheyDo, an AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit theydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, pushing the edge, stay inspired. See you in the next episode.